Hello and welcome back to RageGamingVideos. My name is Olo and these the coded swords. This is the Cipher pattern and this is my cool glowing rock in my fist. You join me today for the coded warrior build. This holy spellblade concept is about having super high faith for high faith incantations and of course the extremely cool Cipher swords and pattern. The coded weapons look incredible. We wanted to see if we could make a relevant build after the buff in 1.06 that increased the hitbox of the Cipher pattern's weapon skill, Unblockable Blade. A very confusing mix of Ash of War names because we have the coded sword Unblockable Blade and then we have the exact same name, Unblockable Blade, for the Cipher pattern, which as you can see is totally different. What they've done is increase the hitbox of this Ash of War, making it much more viable in both PvE, but more importantly PvP, where it's very hard to land. Now it of course actually lands, and yeah, it does a ton of damage, but further in PvE, it'll even stagger opponents. The bosses, if you hit them a couple times with this, like a jump attack, will eventually stagger them. Now yes, with this build we have super high faith, leading to the free choice of some of the best holy incantations. We picked great options like the Rings of Light, the Hone Bolt, Lightning Bolt, Golden Valve for the self-buffing, and of course the hilarious Elden Stars, just to see if we could make it work. The result is an extremely powerful melee setup, enhanced by various buffs, and those holy incantations we can use for utility, and of course added pressure. It's a very cool build to look at, with some very flashy VFX, but it performs well in both sides of content. So let's talk about PvP. Let's begin with Elden Stars, which is just a bit of a silly meme pick. If you can get this off before the fight maybe takes place, then it gives you a lot of space to work with. There's tons of those holy missiles just constantly hitting the enemy, and then the big threat of the big slow one that's going to explode for big damage. You have to be a bit cheeky to actually get this off in a duel. Obviously it's a lot more viable in say open world PvP, maybe during an invasion, where you have a lot more time and space to get it off. But if you do get it off, it leads into a lot of opportunity for free trading, because they're really worried about dealing with this thing that's following them around for such a long time. You can go to town on them, whether you're using ranged incantations or going in with melee. The melee itself is super deadly. These are of course straight swords, which in power stance with their high damage, with the buffs, they're going to attack super quick and do a lot of damage. If you're able to land like 2 combos, so that's 4 hits at least of these blades, you're going to chunk out their health. That's why they're so good for trading. The problem is the straight swords, right? You need a combo. So combining that with say your incantations like Rings of Light or yeah, Elden Stars into these longer combos or proper trading, well then that's really effective. However, what we're doing is we're swapping to the Cipher pattern whenever there's an opportunity to suddenly pull out that unexpected, newly improved Unblockable Blade Ash of War, dashing forward after a small charge for big damage from medium range. It's also unblockable as it says in the name, so if someone's using a shield, it's not really going to help them. If they get hit by that, it's going to do about 700, 800 damage, which is roughly half the health pool of your average player. I find that in 1.06, with that buff to the hitbox, it is much more consistent to land this in PvP because you can use it actually for trading and it'll more consistently land. The Ash of War of the coded swords is called Unblockable Blade also, as I mentioned, and it's a lot more predictable, not one to really rely on. It extends the attack for some nice range and then swings slowly in a horizontal swipe. As there's no follow-ups or combos, it's very lame because it just feels like there should be more to it. It's a cool effect, right? And yet there's no follow-up. The damage is good, but I don't think you're going to land that one all that much. What you can do though is make use of the other very viable incantations. We have the Hone Bolt, which is one of the strongest incantations in the game, a spammable, long-range lightning strike, which we can further improve with our wondrous physic buff. The cast is pretty quick, but it's something you still won't really get off if they're like right up on you and pressuring you close. But if they play at mid or long range, it's so effective at just getting this off and spamming it that they're going to have a really hard time trying to get, say, a cast off in return. Then you have the Rings of Light. We're using the triple version in this case. That's a great way to fight at close or medium range. They won't go overly far, but when they're sent out, they of course come back for a good return hit. And you can chain them, sending off a second or third attack, really pressuring someone for a bit of FP, sure, but well worth it if you're going to overwhelm someone. You can even just throw one out and then rush them as the rings come back at them as you try to melee them at the same time, which is also very strong. Overall then, I really like this build for PvP. It feels good, it feels strong. This is an effective build on all sides, except for Elden Stars, which again is a bit of a meme pick, but when you do get it off, it is actually not bad. Just having the freedom to do it is questionable. You know, with this build, you could entirely rely on that Spellblade concept, we're just casting incantations over and over and relying on them because they do a lot of damage, much like just using the swords works well as well. I'm very pleased in regards to PvP for the new hitbox of the patter, but I am still very disappointed in the coded sword Unblockable Blade because it just feels like there should be more to it, like a combo. Now, on the PvE side of things, if the enemy isn't, say, super resistant to holy damage, then my god, the DPS output with just the coded swords and power stance, while buffed up, is insane. However, if things are a bit more complicated and you've got an enemy that's maybe a bit more agile, or one that's going to stand its ground and trade with you, well then maybe making use of the incantations to your advantage at range, that's going to be better, and it does work well. I also tried just spamming the Patter's Ash of War to see how that performs, and I gotta say, it does a lot of damage, but it's also going to stagger the enemy, leading to the critical hit, and of course, all the damage that comes with that. So it's very viable to just use the Patter and just use its Ash of War. You could do a build that is just that, and it would do really well in PvE. Rolling, Ashing of War, rolling, and so on. I will say the coded swords Ash of War, that Unblockable Blade, that also is viable in PvE, since it's got great range, and there's no real worry about someone predicting what's coming. You can use it as a strong attack for a ranged hit for a big burst, or even like potentially a cleave in AoE. So overall, it's a silly but effective playstyle, which is great for PvE in general. We have our offensive incantations for ranged, we have our deadly power stance coded sword combos, the Cipher Patter and its piercing Ash of War, and if you can get it off, maybe an open world or a big arena, Elden Stars isn't half bad either. The damage isn't amazing, but it's funny and nice to have at the beginning of a fight. Not to mention, some enemies in this game are going to be weak to lightning or holy, and then this thing is nuts. With all of that said, let's explain the build if you want to try it yourself. So, we of course have the two coded swords for your power stance, and then in our main hand we are swapping to the Cipher Patter to pull out the Ash of War and swap off. We aren't really using this for melee, it's just the Ash of War. Since we have high faith in this build, we're using the Erdtree Seal, which has S faith scaling and weighs nothing, which is awesome, and that's another huge benefit of this build. The Erdtree Seal and the Cipher Patter weigh nothing, and then the coded swords only weigh 2.5, so you don't need much endurance in this build at all. While the armor is purely fashion, the helmet is actually not. The Radiant Gold mask strengthens Golden Order incantations. So say Radagon's Rings of Light, we're improving the damage of that by about 10% with this helmet. This build uses a lot of Ashes of War, so the Shard of Alexander to improve the power of that, and then also Carrion Filigree Crest to help with the FP consumption of that. These combo really well. Now for PvP, I am using the Dragon Quest Great Shield, or maybe the magic one to give me some negation, and we have a filler slot of the Erdtree's Favor as always for health, stamina, and equip load. In PvE, where damage negation doesn't really matter at all, using the Sacred Scorpion Charm is a better option to further increase our holy attack. Speaking of which, we also have the Flask of Wondrous Physic, using the Holy Shrouding Cracked Tear, that'll boost our holy attacks, and the Lightning Shrouding Cracked Tear to boost our lightning attacks. Together with Golden Vow and that Flask of Wondrous Physic, we can boost up our swords to 844 AR each, and as I've said and shown, when you're attacking this quick in long combos, that's a lot of damage chaining up. It's also enhancing the Ash of War damage itself, which as I've shown, does a lot in one hit. For a look at my stats, just so you can see them, I'm running 55 Vigor to allow for the 26 Mines. We do use a lot of FP. Only 11 Endurance, because yeah, we don't need much for this build. Everything else is default except for Intelligence and Faith. We have 23 Intelligence. That allows us to use the Radagon's Rings of Light, and then 80 Faith to get the maximum scaling of our A-grade Faith scaling on Coded Swords, the Cipher Patter, and the S scaling on Erdtree Seal. But there you have it. That is the build. What do you think? For me, this feels extremely viable, very strong, and very fun. I love the idea of a faith-based warrior who is physically creating weapons of that holy faith. These coded weapons are a perfect example of that, and they look incredible. If you have any suggestions for other build videos in the future, then let me know in the comments. And if you've enjoyed the video, drop a like, it really helps out. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.